They say that baseball is America's pastime, but for all my life, the spotlight has been firmly on football. I've never been one for sports in general, but the only one I can't seem to escape conversation of year in and year out? Football. Sure, sometimes I'll hear about basketball or baseball, and on extremely rare occasions, even soccer or hockey, but more often than not, it's something related to football. Somehow, despite being in a family that loves football, and being around friends and acquaintances who love football, and even having attended a football game or two, I haven't got a single clue how it's played. But you know what? Today I'm going to try and fix that. I'm going to play through the whole John Madden football franchise, every yearly release from the very start up to Madden 21, playing at least one quarter per game. I'll see if it's possible to learn how to play football by learning at least one thing from each title, and I'll get to see how the biggest franchise in a genre I have little prior experience with evolves as I progress. So this will be a fun challenge. I'm going to have a co-pilot with me, but only for the sake of clarification and for company on this long journey. With that out of the way, let's play some football. A quick note about John Madden Football for DOS, the original release. I won't be starting with this because it's utterly incomprehensible to me. I can only assume it was a good simulation of the sport for the time, but basically everything it's trying to tell me is gibberish. I don't have a single thing I can really take away from this entry. Sorry to disappoint, Madden for DOS diehards. Taking it from the top with John Madden Football. For the most part, I'll be playing as the Broncos in honor of John Elway, the greatest tennis player of all time. There's a pre-game preliminary strategy thing at the start, which would be useful if I knew what exactly it meant. I really don't have a clue what's going on here. My players move, get knocked down, and plays can be selected. The problem is, without knowledge of the sport, I have absolutely no idea what any of these mean. Sometimes I can pass the ball, other times I can't. I'm not sure what situation any particular play would be useful for, so I'm basically picking them at random. One of them allowed me to punt, which seemed to give me decent progress, but I wasn't really able to make it down the field, let alone score. In particular, while defending, I could barely do anything. I found my CPU teammates did most of the work here. At least the game holds up decently in terms of visuals and audio. I did manage to take away a couple rules at least. The main goal of the game is to get the ball to the other side of the field. A down is called when you get knocked down, and you have 4 of them before you switch sides. Getting to the end of the field results in a touchdown, giving you 6 points and the chance to score an extra point immediately following. Coming from the first game, there's a bit of a presentation bump here. Menus look nicer, and player numbers are displayed under active players now, even if that's totally meaningless to me. Needless to say, I'm still struggling a lot here and haven't picked up on what any of my plays do. I never really get anywhere by running with the ball, so ideally I would pass more often, but from what I can tell, some plays are running plays and others are passing plays, and it seems like it has to do with the color of the play? Not like these symbols mean much to me. I discovered that, like in real life, players can get injured, and when they do, a reckless ambulance barrels in and plows through anyone in its path to pick up the guy who originally got hurt. It's so dumb. I love it and I hope it doesn't go away. Anyway, the rules I picked up this time. Punting gives the other team the ball. You can't get a touchdown if you don't catch the ball. Certain plays pass the ball, other plays run the ball. This one is incredibly similar to 92, almost indistinguishable really. A few different menus and colors and that's about it. Still not improving very much at the game at this point. I might just be stupid, but it seems difficult to switch players mid-game. I could have stopped a touchdown had I been able to switch quick enough. Being unsure of who I'm controlling in general is such a big hindrance, it makes defense harder than it should be. In terms of the rules this time, there's a couple of things I'm not totally sure about yet that happened this game. A fumble happened, but I'm not sure what that means yet, and it doesn't appear that short gains really gain or lose any ground. I did pick up a few things for certain though. There's a coin toss at the start in which the visiting team calls heads or tails, with the winner choosing whether to kick or receive the ball. You can only pass the ball up to a certain point, after which you have no choice but to run it. After a failed pass, you go back to where you started that down. If you pass a certain point, you go back to first down and get more chances to score. If the ball is intercepted, control turns over to the other team. And finally, a field goal gives you 3 points. '94 is the first year EA got the official NFL branding, and you can tell they wanted to put it to good use with a substantial bump in terms of presentation. There's more commentated preliminary info at the start of a game, menus and visuals both look nicer, and the play menu is easier to navigate than it was before, being all on the same screen this time. At this point, I'm starting to get a better handle on what plays do and what some positions are called, and I actually managed to get my first score on this marathon by means of a touchdown off of an interception, which I've been told is apparently very impressive. So far, this is the best of the bunch in my eyes. As for what I learned this time around, fumbles can give you the ball. EA decided to do another overhaul this year, and the results are not very appealing, honestly. Being made in 1994, the 3D model to 2D sprite craze popularized by Donkey Kong Country seems to have crept its way in here, and the pseudo 3D looking sprites used here have aged like milk. The player interface is also worse, moving to an awful hybrid of 94's one-screen setup and prior entry scroll to select approach. Switching players is also much harder than it should be in this version, but that's mostly because the game as a whole runs much slower than previous entries. I suppose on a positive note, I seem to be improving at the game, if only by a bit, and I did learn a few things from playing this one. Touchbacks are a thing. If you're on the receiving end and get taken down at the end zone, the opposing team will start at the 20 line instead of getting a touchdown right away. There's a new rule in place that lets you get 2 extra points instead of 1 by going for another touchdown after a touchdown. A second conversion, apparently. If a kickoff is taken by the team that kicked the ball, they immediately get control. Right before the title screen, Reggie Brooks is memorialized for all time. I presume this was a competition that took place sometime in the mid-90s. Good on you, Reggie. I wonder how he's doing these days. Other than that, there's really not much I can say about this one. It looks marginally better than 95? The speed issue seems to have been remedied by making the game run faster, but they forgot to adjust the game clock, so now that runs faster than it should too. It's probably the worst Madden on the Genesis, unless one of the later ones is somehow even worse than this. Wait, the Reckless Ambulance is no longer a thing? That tears it, this one's the worst. As for what I got from this entry, touchbacks can happen if the ball goes past the end zone. The 2-minute warning is essentially a free clock stop. The first entry to make the full move to 3D, and EA is sure proud of it. A full, unnecessarily long FMV intro with models much better than the game can actually display and blocky early 3D character models in-game. Campy as it may be today, the presentation here is well beyond what the series has offered so far, and we continue to inch closer and closer to the presentation of an actual televised football game. Just look at that portrait. A true tennis champion if ever there was one. I don't seem to be getting much better, but at least the controls going from the Genesis to the PS1 are similar enough to work with. Screwing around after a play actually got me into trouble here, and I got penalized for an offside without really meaning to. Looks like my days of carelessly tossing myself into other players are coming to an end. At least I finally blocked an extra point, so there's that, I guess. Holding is a thing, whatever that is. This time around, I learned that penalties can be accepted or declined depending on which would favor your team. And teams get 3 timeouts per half, which stop the clock. Now, if only I knew which actions did or didn't stop the clock. The second entry on the PS1 is the first to bring us custom characters, a feature I remember being pretty popular in the late 90s and early 2000s in a lot of different games. It's nice to see it here, even if making a character with ridiculously high stats doesn't seem to be helping me much. The devs were definitely still getting their bearings when it came to how players should control in 3D. Passing is a little awkward, for instance, being bound to hitting the same button twice. At least there are some nice informational inclusions in this one. Now you can see player statistics, and the strategy briefing at the beginning of the game has returned. As for what I got from this entry, a safety occurs when you're tackled in your end zone and gives the opposing team 2 points. Surprisingly, this game has the best presentation so far. The models look better with more detailed players, making it easier to tell them apart at a glance, and the camera has shifted from a top-down view to a more traditional camera angle. Commentary by Madden and Associates is more common than before, and plays seem to be more detailed than before as well. Not that it's really improved my game all that much, but alas, I'll get there eventually. This time around I learned that wide receivers, well, receive the ball. I was disappointed to discover that John Elway retired this year. Unfortunately for him, there is no retirement while I have the ability to make custom characters. Other than that, this is another entry with only incremental changes. Players seem to have more weight to them, but that could just be my imagination. This is also the first game with an obvious tutorial, something I'm extremely grateful for. Not that it's really made me any better though. This time around, I discovered that audibles modify the play you're about to make before it's executed. Another iterative entry like 99 to 2000 or 95 to 96. I'm not very surprised since the focus was probably on 6th generation hardware with the PS2's launch this year. It was probably easier to put out something like this on the cheap. As for what I learned this time, defensive linemen are the first 3 or 4 players on the line. This is the first entry on all 6th generation consoles, and with it comes another bump in graphical quality and presentation, with the models in particular looking significantly better than they did on the PS1. The AI seems much more competent, and the physics are starting to become more true to life than they ever could be, for better or worse. I was able to adapt to the new control layout pretty quickly this time, and the new suggested plays feature is incredibly useful for someone like me who's still pretty clueless about what plays to call. This time around, I learned that the halfback is the running back who runs the ball during a running play. So I'm not really sure what happened between entries, but the genre seems to have shifted in a completely different direction for this one. Instead of playing as a person, you're in a car, and I think you have to take that to the other side of the field? It's a pretty radical change in direction, kind of out of left field. Wait, what? What? Oh, give me a second. Yeah, it's more football. Things haven't changed very much from last year's entry, but what is new is the Football 101 mode. A godsend for someone like me who's still very new to all this. Being coached by Madden himself about what certain positions and plays do is such an obvious idea, I'm not sure why it took this long to implement it, but I'm glad it's here. From his advice, I learned what a tight end is, the player on the end who supports the lineman. Another entry with seemingly minimal changes from its predecessor, but this one does include minicamp mode. Training drill minigames that help you hone certain skills with training exercises. It's another great inclusion that helps me sharpen my skills a bit, even if they are still a bit lacking. I was informed that Michael Vick is apparently legendarily overpowered in this game, so I decided to give him a shot, and that's my takeaway from this one. Michael Vick is fast. I've been mostly sticking to passing plays prior to this, but he's certainly shown me the value of a good running play. Yet another iterative change, though the presentation has improved a bit here. Minigame mode returns, there's more real-time drills against CPUs, and the games are getting more and more similar to a televised match. Still, it's hard to ignore how these games are blending together. At least there's one nice change. Defensive plays now make the distinction between man and zone plays more explicit, which taught me that some plays cover specific areas of the field while others focus on individual players. Another entry like 2001 on previous gen hardware where the first of the next generation systems released, but unlike 2001, this entry takes a new mechanic from its next gen counterpart in the quarterback vision system. Unfortunately, I find it really distracting and not very useful. Many times I got led astray by it and passed to someone who wasn't even close to being open. Also, Create a Fan is now a thing, so there's that. I finally learned some things that stop the clock too. Incompletes and running out of bounds will both stop the clock. The first entry in HD on the two HD 7th generation consoles proudly displayed when you boot up the game. As usual, the visual bump is significant. Although it's a bit rough around the edges and there are some visual glitches, the player models look great. This game also introduces its new features to you right off the bat, and hit stick is one of them. I love this feature. It's similar to using the C-stick in a Smash Bros. Game in that it lets you easily pull off maneuvers that usually require different button presses with a simple flick on the right stick. The play menu is also much clearer. It's better organized for the casual player and more broadly accessible than in previous entries. As for what I've learned, well, at this point I've really been stretching to point out things I've learned organically. There's not a lot more to do but sharpen my skill at the game, and since we're past the halfway point now, I'll definitely see this through to the end. Surprisingly, there's a bit of a presentation bump here, both during player intros and in terms of general graphical fidelity. Look at that, Vince Young, Scott the Woz, eat your heart out. Controls are now displayed on screen more often, a handy change for all sorts of players. Less handy is the regression of the play menu, reverting to a system similar to the 6th Gen one. Boo. I think I have a pretty good handle on playing offense at this point, but whenever I play defense it feels like I would play better if I put the controller down instead. This entry leads with the new Madden test, a way to give you a personalized level of difficulty. It's a cool idea, and as the 20th anniversary game, I guess it's a good way to test what I've learned too. Or it would be if the offensive side of it wasn't useless. Offensively, it's not exactly a test. I see an input, I press that input. Easy. Defensively, it's not a bad test, but I've always been bad at defense, so it's not telling me much I don't already know. The actual match I loaded into is the first time in the series where random weather has picked snow. I can't personally feel the effects of it. I assume it makes the field slippery? The footprints on the field are a great touch though. There's also a new kick system introduced here. It's fundamentally similar, but entirely controlled by the movement of the analog stick instead of by a timed button press, and feels a lot better to use as a result. Unfortunately, this appears to be the last time we'll get commentary from John Madden himself. Pour one out of the baby bucket for this tragic loss. Seems like there was a visual overhaul with this one. It looks great, definitely the most realistic look at the sport we've got yet. Just ignore the crowd over there. The advertising is starting to get ridiculous at this point. So hey, another point for realism there. Don't tell me you aren't affected. I also got a huge craving for Reese's Cups, it's okay. Most of the features from previous entries are back, as far as I can tell, including the Madden test, and the new play selector is a good balance between the classic and modern styles. This entry seems pretty focused on refinement, and that's fine by me. I've been ignoring online features up until now and focused solely on the actual football experience, but this entry has forced my hand. I can't ignore the push at monetization in this entry related to the Ultimate Team mode, a glorified loot box system that's become more well known as controversy over loot boxes has risen over the past few years. But what I didn't know about is the very blatant pay-to-win benefits present in the shop that's put right in your face on startup. Combine the two and you have some really disgusting monetization practices. I don't know if this in particular goes away in the future, but Ultimate Team definitely sticks around, and this shop feature has left a bad taste in my mouth from the start. At least when it comes to the actual game of football, this entry has introduced two great new features. There's Excel Clock, which speeds up the pace of the game by skipping downtime between plays, and GameFlow, which automatically suggests plays, but more importantly, it explains why you should use any particular play. For someone who's still pretty clueless like me, this is extremely helpful and I hope it sticks around. I'm really starting to feel the more realistic physics the past few entries have been employing, but it's honestly difficult for me to discern if anything is actually changing under the hood. They brought out a horse. They modeled a horse. Without a doubt, I picked wisely when I followed the legendary John Elway into battle, noted champion of tennis. Unfortunately, it seems like the team behind this game is just spinning their wheels at this point. We're back to the old, worse kick system, and GameFlow has become much less useful as it no longer explains the strategy behind plays. The presentation is becoming more similar to an actual televised game, so I guess there's that at least. The one time I pick up the next generation console entry on the next generation console, and I pick up what's apparently the inferior version of it. Just my luck, huh? Still, the game still looks good. In terms of models, I think it's the best so far, though the field definitely looks worse. The major selling point of this version is that there's support for the Wii U gamepad. I found this addition much more useful than I thought it would be. I'd go as far as to say it's one of the best implementations of the gamepad of the system, as depressing as that thought is. You can redo plays on the fly and switch between players by tapping on them, making this the easiest control scheme to use yet. It's probably the ideal way to play the game single player or online, though I imagine local play with only one gamepad is probably a bit more rough. It's a huge shame this is the only entry to come out on the Wii U. There was so much potential here that just never got explored. From Madden 13 to Madden 25. Sure gonna have trouble in 2024, aren't we? They'll probably take the coward's way out and make that entry Madden 35, but it's amusing to think about the possibility of having two Madden 25s you can buy for the Xbox, and that some poor kid out there might get a game a decade out of date because of dumb naming decisions. Despite the leap to 8th generation hardware, this one is nearly identical to 13 in terms of presentation. There's a clear graphical jump though. The better models, reflections, crowd, and field are all readily apparent. At this point, controls are now totally standardized too. I was able to go from the PlayStation button layout to Nintendo's layout to the Xbox layout without a problem. The hit stick has apparently been given additional options as well, but aside from that, there's not much else to say that hasn't already been said. This game leads with the pre-rendered cinematic showcasing in-engine footage. Comparing it to previous entries with intros like this, it's a good way to show how far we've come graphically, and it's a significant graphical boost over last year. It also leads into a game in progress, so if you're invested in the cinematic, you can keep playing, and I'm sure some fans really got something out of this intro. Past that, you're heavily encouraged to go into training mode, and then you're encouraged to check out Ultimate Team. They really want to make sure you both know how to play and want to give gambling a try. At least things have improved in-game a bit. Suggested plays now have explanations again and seem to be driven by how the community plays the game. A quality idea. I feel like the more realistic physics in play since Madden 25 have started to hamper my play a bit, as it's a bit harder than it used to be to get away with some things. This one leads with another pre-rendered cinematic going right into gameplay. It's not as impressive a second time around, and if you just want to pop the game in and get right into an online match with a friend, this is annoying to deal with. At least they're still adding new mechanics, or at least claiming to. I think there's a slight upgrade to the visuals too, but it's becoming harder to tell as we continue through the HD games. Another year, another unskippable pre-rendered cinematic. The last few games have really bled together, not helped by using similar interfaces for menus and identical interfaces for the score bar at the top and the play menu. I believe them when they say they're adding new mechanics, and that's great and all, but from my perspective, not a lot is really changing between entries. Load times in this game are really awful, taking several minutes between setting up a match and actually starting to play. I'm not sure what changed between entries, but none of the previous entries were anywhere near as bad about load times. This entry actually seems to add a few noteworthy features. There's now an arcade mode and a simulation mode, and from the explanation given, it seems like things are more exaggerated in arcade mode. Should be a nice change for me. There's a story mode this time around, which I remember being their big advertising focus, and you can follow along with the real football season in real time. Or could at least. It's about time something like that was added. Best of all, there's no unskippable intro this time around. As for the gameplay, yeah, it's basically Madden 16 again. Not a whole lot I can say here. Touchbacks have been moved to the 25-yard line instead of the 20-yard line, and apparently there have been some changes to the physics engine, but I can't say I've noticed a lot of difference, except for when especially strange things happen. I know I'm playing on arcade mode, but I don't think I should have been able to do that. Huh. Vinatieri? Why does that ring a bell? If nothing else, Madden 20 has the biggest visual improvement since Madden 25. It seems like they're really starting to push 8th generation hardware to its limits, and we inch ever closer to replicating reality with this one. There are multiple suggested plays now, which is great, and there are now superstar abilities, though I have no clue how these work and wasn't able to activate them. That new physics engine is definitely doing things it shouldn't, though. Like clipping through a player's legs and forcefully gluing my hands to the ball during a passing play. Pretty annoying. Since this is the last game I'll be covering, I decided to play a full game to test what I've learned and see if I can make any progress. And what better opponent is there for the Broncos than the Broncos? In gameplay terms, this is another very similar iterative entry, but now that the formula has been standardized and I've been through 30 games so far, I made my way through this game much easier than I would have in the past. Despite some mostly visual bugs along the way, along with that passing glitch returning to ruin my day. At the end of it all, thanks to the new mechanics and a better understanding of the sport, I actually managed to use what I learned to win this game. And by a significant margin too. If you would have asked me if I thought I would win a game at the start of all this, I wouldn't have been able to say yes with a straight face. So, we're finally at the end of this long journey through John Madden football. It's had its ups and downs, but I've come out of it with a greater understanding of how these games work and a greater appreciation for football games as a whole. It's been interesting seeing how these games have changed, from humble 16-bit origins to near photorealistic simulators. What I can't really ignore, though, is that there has been a pretty obvious slip in quality of these games to ensure a new one will be pumped out every single year. Just trying to differentiate Madden 15 from 16 and 17 can tell you that. While the core game remains solid throughout the series' history for the most part, and I'm glad they're acknowledging players who want a more casual experience as well as those who want a serious simulation of the sport, two obvious problems have reared their heads. The first is that, since 2005, EA has had absolutely no competition because of their exclusive licensing deal with the NFL, giving them a monopoly on the football genre. The second is their obsessive push for monetization. Football itself does not change enough between entries to justify a brand new, full-price entry every single year, especially with the advent of DLC ever since the mid-2000s. And while I'm sure the people who buy every entry every year are in the minority, this push towards monetization is especially clear with the Ultimate Team system. What better way to target compulsive gamblers and earn your company billions than to force them to spin a slot machine for the chance to earn their favorite players and wipe the slate clean the next year? Between these two things, it's obvious why things like Create a Player, Football 101, and minigames have long since disappeared, and why things like the passing glitch and other visual bugs aren't fixed. If they have no competition and a good number of whales earning them cash hand over fist, why would they bother to change anything? I came into all this without a stake in the franchise, without caring about football at all. But now I'm coming out the other side with a new perspective. In one of my earlier videos, I urged my viewers to understand where I was coming from as a big fan of the Pokemon series and to think critically about the series. And now I feel the need to extend that understanding myself to people who are fans of Madden. It's possible, likely even, that I got some things wrong. By all means, please correct me. Tell me why your favorite Madden entry is your favorite. By examining each entry for myself, I can clearly see why fans are upset, and I'd like to amplify their concerns. As I've said before, if you can't vote with your wallet, informing others is the next best option. The idea for this video was a joke, more or less. Friends I talked about it with laughed at the idea that I could learn football through these games, and I agreed. I didn't honestly expect to walk away from this with an understanding of the game, but here we are. Will this experience be enough to get me to actively follow football? No. Will it be enough to get me to play regularly, or think about picking up the latest installment? Again, no. What this experience has given me, though, is an understanding and appreciation of the sport that so many people I care about have loved for years, and now I can truly stand in solidarity with those who really do love the Madden games and want them to be the best they can be. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you could leave a like and or comment down below. And if you want to see more of these long-form analysis videos in the future, please consider subscribing. Until next time, I'm Forma, and those are my thoughts.